Hi everyone, I'm Amy. Today we're talking about the only residents of the Forbidden City who never had to bow or kneel to the emperor. In fact, they were often the ones being served. These residents have outlasted dynasties, survived revolutions, and still walk the halls of the Forbidden City today. I'm talking about the Imperial Palace Cats, or 公猫. Of course, cats weren't the only four-legged residents of the Forbidden City. The emperor and the imperial family also kept other animals, such as dogs. But there was usually a major difference in how they were treated, and palace cats often enjoyed a much higher status. Records and stories of these palace cats go all the way back to the earliest dynasties. By the Tang and Song dynasties, the presence of these cats can be seen among the imperial family and famous consorts. However, they truly became famous as an official part of the palace life in the Ming and Qing dynasties. This isn't just a story about cute pets. It's also a story about a government office during the Ming dynasty called the Imperial Cat House, 猫儿房. This was an office staffed by palace eunuchs whose entire career depended on the mood of a kitten. These were cats that had official government positions and salaries. Sometimes a cat was a muse for an imperial painting. Sometimes it was a metaphor to warn against corruption. And there was even a pampered imperial kitty that received a funeral more grand than a high-ranking official. According to the Ming Dynasty eunuch Liu Ruoyu, in the records of affairs within the palace, the Imperial Cat House, with 3 or 4 attendants, specifically feeds cats with official titles. Any cat loved by the emperor can be promoted to the rank of manager. Think about that. In the Ming Dynasty court, a cat could be a manager. The Imperial Cat House of the Ming Dynasty was a sub-department of the eunuch-led bureaucracy of the 24 offices. It was staffed by Jing Shi. They were specialized eunuchs whose entire career was dedicated to the welfare of the emperor's felines. But what was their actual job? It was much more than just feeding and cleaning. The Imperial Cat House was responsible for the selection, registry, and promotion of cats. They would scout for cats with extraordinary features, such as beautiful long hair, rare colors, or specific patterns. These Imperial Palace Cats were then given titles based on their gender and status. If it was a male, he was called a 小厮. If it was a female, she was called a 丫头. But if it was a neutered male, a cat eunuch, if you will, then it was given the high-ranking title of 老爷, which roughly meant lord. And then there were the manager cats, which wasn't just a cute nickname. When an imperial palace cat reached this rank, it was said to receive comparable rewards and stipends as a mid-ranking eunuch. This meant that it could receive a monthly stipend of silver that would be used by its eunuch caretakers to buy its food and other supplies. As a side note, this was a perfect example of a system that created an environment for palace corruption. Since the palace cats couldn't personally audit the books, later stories suggest that the eunuch caretakers commonly kept most of its palace cats' salaries for themselves. Now, these imperial cat titles weren't just empty official titles. The imperial palace cats had real functional jobs to protect the wooden structures and silk from rodents. For some emperors, these palace cats also acted as spiritual guardians. The first well-recorded cat-loving emperor of the Ming Dynasty was Emperor Shende. This emperor was remembered as a brilliant artist, and to him, cats were the ultimate muses. He didn't just want 1 or 2 cats. It is said that he ordered the Imperial Cat House to collect over 100 cats from the common people so he could study them. He would spend hours in the palace gardens watching them play, hunt, and sleep, trying to capture their inner spirit on paper. He made famous paintings like The Cat Beneath Flowers and The Spring Play in a Tang Garden. In these scrolls, he depicted cats in every possible state. Some leaping through flowers, some sleeping under bamboo, and some staring at the viewer with that classic look of judgment. Now, the most famous emperor when it comes to the imperial palace cats was probably Emperor Jiajing of the Ming Dynasty. After nearly being strangled in his sleep by a group of palace maids in 1542, the emperor became a paranoid recluse. He stopped trusting humans and instead turned to his trusty cat, 双眉, which meant frosty eyebrows, who was a silver-gray fur cat with 2 pure white eyebrows. 双眉 was said to be so intelligent that he acted as the emperor's personal bodyguard. When the emperor woke up, 双眉 was there to guide him. When the emperor slept, 双眉 stood watch. If he had to leave to eat or use the potty, he would wait until the emperor was awake before going away. When 双眉 felt his end was near, he reportedly went to the emperor one last time, gazing at him with deep sadness before walking away. The loyal 双眉 had come to say goodbye. When he was found shortly after, he had already passed away. The emperor was devastated. He ordered the Hanling scholars to write funeral elegies for 双眉, and the junior official Yuan Wei wrote a line that captured the emperor's heart. The lion has transformed into a dragon, 化狮为龙. The emperor was so moved that he promoted Yuan Wei instantly, propelling his career into the Grand Secretariat, where he eventually became a powerful prime minister. Emperor Jiajing then gave 双眉 the posthumous title of 囚龙, which roughly meant little dragon. He ordered 双眉 's body to be placed in a golden coffin and buried halfway up a slope, under a cypress tree, in the area known today as Jingshan Park. He named the grave the Tomb of the Little Dragon, and the tree above it the Little Dragon Cypress. Interestingly, for the next several centuries, rumors and folklore persisted of treasure hunters searching the area for that legendary golden coffin, but it has never been found. If it even existed in the first place, it likely vanished long ago with the fall of the Ming Dynasty. The Imperial Cat House didn't just manage the cats inside the walls of the Forbidden City. It was actually responsible for all of the Imperial Palace cats across the entire Imperial City area, which included the area around the Forbidden City, the Imperial Gardens, supply warehouses, and Imperial temples. After the death of 双眉, records say that Emperor Jiajing turned his favor to 12 cats who lived around the Qianming Gate. This gate was the entrance to the Dagaoxuan Hall, an imperial Taoist temple complex located just to the north of the Forbidden City. Emperor Jiajing famously abandoned the Forbidden City for the last 20 years of his reign, and the Dagaoxuan Hall became his main temple, where he practiced Taoist alchemy in pursuit of immortality. In Taoist and Buddhist iconography, lion-like creatures were the official guardians of the gate. Because China had no native lions, cats were often viewed as their miniature substitutes. These 12 cats became the emperor's constant companion and spiritual guardians. As such, they were fed really well, as a ritual expense for the protection of the emperor. Records say that they were fed over 1,700 pounds of pork and 365 sets of liver every single year. That was significantly better fed than the common people of that time. However, having a bunch of imperial palace cats had its dark side. Later stories claim that towards the end of the Ming Dynasty, during the reign of Emperor Wanli, the palace cat population has exploded. According to the unofficial gleanings of the Wanli period, the shrieking of the palace cats during mating season would echo through the walls of the palace, and that several newborn princes and princesses were actually frightened to death by the noise. But because these palace cats enjoyed imperial favor, the eunuchs and wet nurses could not do anything to stop them. As the Ming Dynasty fell and the Qing Dynasty took over the Forbidden City in 1644, many things changed, including the Imperial Cat House. In the Qing Dynasty, there was no longer a dedicated office for the management of the Imperial Palace cats. But we know that imperial pets were managed under the Imperial Household Department, and the office of huntsmanship did manage imperial dogs and hunting falcons. So some historians have speculated that they may have also managed the Imperial Palace cats, but it is not clearly recorded. Slightly different from the Ming Dynasty Imperial Cat House, Qing Dynasty Palace Cats were managed by a mix of eunuchs and Manchu bondservants for their care and daily upkeep. In the Qing Dynasty, cats were no longer officials. Instead, they became true imperial pets. However, they were still expected to catch rodents as a practical function. Palace records show that the government shifted from paying cat salaries to crafting cat luxuries instead. We see records of eunuchs ordering silk-lined baskets and custom-made cages for when the cats traveled with the emperor to the summer palace. Interestingly, Emperor Qianlong of the Qing Dynasty viewed the Imperial Palace Cats through the lens of a scholar. He was reportedly fascinated by the science of the feline eye and studied how a cat's pupils tell time. It is said that the emperor observed that at noontime, a cat's pupil would shrink into a vertical line as thin as a thread, which he worked into his poem titled Porcelain Cat. He was so proud of this observation that he had the poem carved into the base of a porcelain incense burner. In addition, Emperor Qianlong commissioned a series of paintings that served as a detailed record of the Imperial Palace Cats. These paintings were made by Western court painters like the missionary Ai Qimeng to capture the palace cats with lifelike detail, which was very different from the art style used in previous dynasties. One of the famous series of this collection is the Li Nu Ying, which roughly translates to image of cats. However, Emperor Qianlong's most famous cat-related legacy involves a historical mistake, one that ended up creating some of the most expensive pet accessories in human history. At the time, there were several extremely rare and valuable ceramic basins in the imperial palace from the Song Dynasty. However, palace lore and anecdotes associated these basins with the Tang Dynasty, describing them as feeding bowls for palace cats, which Emperor Qianlong accepted, and he even wrote an interesting poem about them. He took these priceless artifacts and ordered the imperial workshops to build custom sandalwood stands for them. He told the craftsmen to lower the height and deepen the base of the stands so that the palace cats could eat comfortably. On the bottom of one basin, Emperor Qianlong actually had a poem carved into the ceramic itself. In the poem, he debated whether the word "wo," which means small dog, was actually referring to a cat in the Tang Dynasty court. In the story, because the animal jumped onto a board game, he concluded that the animal had to be a cat and not a dog. Imagine a cat eating its dinner out of a bowl that is now a centerpiece of a museum, while sitting on a throne of sandalwood. Emperor Qianlong also connected cats to the principle of good governance and used cat philosophy to teach his ministers about loyalty and corruption. He often cited the great poet Su Dongpo, who famously said that one keeps a cat to catch mice. One cannot keep a cat that doesn't catch mice. That made a lot of sense to the emperor, who compared an official who didn't do his job to a cat that doesn't hunt. He even used cats to critique historical villains, comparing the corrupt Tang Dynasty minister Li Yifu to a cat that looks soft and sweet on the outside, but hides a deadly, treacherous nature within. As the Qing Dynasty entered its final decades, the atmosphere in the Forbidden City shifted from the scholarly curiosity of Emperor Qianlong to the strict rule of the Empress Dowager Cixi. For Empress Dowager Cixi, cats were a test of discipline for the imperial household. She was known to keep dozens of expensive, rare cats on the imperial palace grounds. But unlike the Ming Dynasty emperors who let their cats run wild, she managed hers with cold discipline. She assigned specific palace maids and eunuchs to be solely responsible for each cat. Empress Dowager Cixi would periodically hold a feline audit. She would pick up a cat, feel its weight, and inspect the glossiness of its fur. If a cat looked thin, sickly, or even just a little unhappy, the servant in charge would be severely punished, often with a brutal beating. According to later anecdotes, this created a secret culture among the palace maids known as mo mao. If a maid realized that her assigned cat was losing weight or looking scruffy, she knew that she was in danger. Under the cover of darkness, she would sneak into another part of the palace and swap her unhealthy cat with a similar-looking, healthier cat from another maid's quarters. The palace was filled with so many cats that the maids hoped the Empress Dowager wouldn't notice the subtle difference in personality, as long as the color and weight were right. Some maids were so terrified of the Empress Dowager's temper that they would sleep with the cats in their arms every night, literally guarding the cat's health with their own lives. When the last emperor of China, Puyi, was expelled from the Forbidden City in 1924, the system of the Imperial Palace Cats ended. Well, kind of. Imperial China was gone, the eunuchs were gone, and the imperial system of palace cats was gone. But some of the Imperial Palace Cats stayed behind, maybe hiding in the rafters or deep within the shadows of the Palace of Eternal Harmony. For many years after the fall of the Qing Dynasty, the Imperial Palace Cats of the Forbidden City were forgotten by the history books. But as the Forbidden City transitioned into the Palace Museum that we know today, the staff noticed something interesting. There wasn't really a rat problem. In a wooden palace complex with over 9,000 rooms and 1.8 million priceless relics, rodents are typically a real problem and a constant threat. They chew on ancient silk, nest in wooden beams, and damage paper documents. So a minimal rodent damage rate was definitely surprising and strange. It turns out the Forbidden City had unpaid employees taking care of the rodent problem. Today, there are around 200 palace cats living within the Forbidden City. While some are recent arrivals, many are believed to be the direct descendants of the Imperial Palace Cats from many years ago. These cats are lovingly known today as the Palace Cat Security, 猫保安. Modern management has replaced the ancient eunuch system with scientific care. Each cat is registered, vaccinated, and given a name. To keep the resident population stable, the museum runs a program where stray cats are caught, neutered, and then returned to their specific courtyards. Beyond medical attention, the palace staff ensures that the cats are properly fed through a network of designated feeding stations located throughout the complex. I guess that's their modern-day stipend for their hard work. If you visit the Palace Museum in Beijing today, you might see them sunning themselves on the yellow glazed tiles or slipping quietly behind a vermilion pillar. These cats also have their own territories. If you want to see them, your best bet is the treasure hall, where they are commonly seen. You can also find them patrolling the Palace of Benevolence and the Hall of Martial Valor. To the millions of tourists who visit every year, seeing and petting these palace cats has become just as essential and popular as seeing the dragon throw. They even have their own dedicated social media accounts, and their images are used on over hundreds of different Palace Museum merchandise items, playing an important part in generating revenue to support the very palace they call home. Occasionally, new kittens will be found within the rooms of the Forbidden City, in order to prevent the cat population from exploding, while ensuring the cats that do stay are healthy and manageable. Many of these new arrivals will be put up for adoption into new homes. And at the end of the day, when the sun begins to set, the cats emerge for their shift. While the humans go home, the cats take over, leaping onto the yellow glazed tiles and beginning their nightly patrol. Interestingly, they still show a strange behavior of discipline. According to the Palace Museum staff, these palace cats never scratch the ancient wooden structures and never try to enter the private bedchambers. It's almost as if they still remember the imperial rules from the time of their ancestors. The Imperial Palace Cats are the living soul of the Forbidden City. Empires rise and fall. Emperors are crowned and deposed. But the cats remain. That's it for today's video. If you enjoyed today's topic, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Tatsu, are you a gongmao? Are you?
Stay curious, stay magical.